Come on.
There we go.
There it is. All right. We got to let the song rock a little. You have to play the game of when will we get copyright infringed and sued. We'll let that rock in the back. We're joined by Dr. Allan Bacon in Maui, Hawaii, the actual place, not just the name. He's not Maui Athletics out of Massachusetts. So Thunderstruck is the song playing. I guess if we give credit, maybe AC/DC, maybe they won't sue us. I don't know.
Thank you guys for allowing us to have that.
And he used it as his walkout song with his wife at his wedding, as I was just informed. So fun fact, you can use that at trivia night, folks. And in the next Jeopardy thing. Did they figure out who the new host is going to be yet? Did I miss that? I thought that was like big national news. I don't know.
I'm not sure. We don't get national news that much out here. Our news it's very, very focused. We're kind of our own little world here.
Well, yeah, man. Again, I'm gonna try to become your best friend, so I have a place to stay.
Yeah.
Go out there, yeah. Because as we were just talking about before we went on, it's not a cheap place. But no. Yes. I've only been to Kauai and Oahu, but if folks listening have not been to any part of Hawaii, any of the islands, you got to get out there ASAP. It's a pretty amazing place, and I'm very jealous that you get to wake up. How close are you to the ocean? I'm guessing.
Oh, 10 minutes.
Yeah.
I mean, so when we were deciding to get our house, we bought a place. We're like, okay, well, we don't want to be right on the water. First off, we can't afford that because right on the water in Maui is kind of ridiculous.
Yeah.
But there are benefits to being slightly away. I mean, whenever there is, heavy rainfall, we can get some flooding on some of those low-lying areas. So we're outside of that, but, with an easy drive, we're kind of centralized. Nice. And, the great thing about Maui is almost a similar thing that you see with like Miami, where if you want to go to a certain beach and you're like, oh man, it's raining there, just wait 10 minutes or go to a different beach. And, everything's within about half an hour of us. So yeah, there's always a place to hit up.
Nice. Yeah. That's kind of Colorado. Our saying here is, if you don't like the weather, wait 5 minutes.
Wait 5 minutes. Yeah.
It'll change for sure. Yeah. It's always something crazy going on here, right where we are too. We're right next to the Flatiron Mountains. So you get this weird wind effect, and just craziness going on. Sometimes it leads to destructive fires where 991 houses get destroyed on December 30th, which we had to escape from. But yeah, that's a whole nother story. But anyway, let's move on to better, shinier things. So we touched base a while ago. Shout out to Shane McLean, who kind of connect us through some of these articles, Muscle and Fitness, and I'm sure a few other ones, probably all the way back at Barbend, where you and I got to contribute. And I'm always honored to be, as I always say, part of these living legends. I think we can say the all-stars of the space. So always fun to be part of that. So shout out to him. And then you were just speaking at the Inland Empire Fitness Conference. I have no idea, I'll be honest, where that is, what that is, but I'm curious. We're going to talk a little about what you talked about there, but just tell us a little about the conference.
The conference is something that's put on by a buddy of mine, Tim Arndt, in Spokane, Washington. And they bill themselves, and they truly are one of the most intimate fitness conferences in North America. And it's really cool because they get a large pull of some of the greatest speakers around the country, and a lot of different coaches from around the country, both from the United States and from Canada. And their build is the most intimate because Tim sets up all of these different dinners, after parties, all those kind of things, lunches. And the big thing that he has about this is you go to a lot of these conferences and they'll charge you an extra $100, $150 to have a ticket to be able to eat with the presenters or the conference speakers. And at Inland Empire, we're just all kind of in there together. If you're a person that's attending the fitness conference, you can go up to any of the presenters at any time, obviously when they're not giving their presentation, and just shoot the shit with them. And that's one of the great things about it, because you actually get to do those follow-up questions. You get to meet people. It's a great networking type of event. But it's really cool because you get to form some more intimate relationships with some people that you might have been talking with a lot online. And that in our space in particular, our industry is kind of built on these virtual relationships. So being able to all come together, unwind a little bit, and be able to meet people is always a great thing.
Yeah, that's it sounds like a nice place to hang out. I don't know if you know Andrew Coates.
I do.
Yeah, I had him on here a while ago, and he had just gotten back from it sounds like a similar type of conference down in Orlando that I think it was the first year they had put it on. I don't know if you were there for that. I forgot the name of it. So I apologize to Andrew and whoever the organizers of that were, but it sounded like a pretty cool.
That might have been Nick Lamb's sleep conference.
No, I think it was
Okay.
it was more fitness focused.
Well, he does a whole lot of fitness stuff within his conference, but
Yeah.
it's called like the Professional Sleep Conference or something.
Mm.
Nick, don't be mad at me. I don't remember the exact name, but both Nick and Andrew were presenters at the Inland Empire as well.
Nice.
With me, yeah.
Yeah, well, let's jump over to what you talked about there, and just for anyone who's not familiar, Dr. Allan Bacon, obviously a name, I think, and I was just listening to another podcast you were on. Obviously, not a easy name to forget.
No.
Everyone in the fitness space should love some bacon. You know, that's always good. But your background, the doctor is dentistry. Which is pretty, you know, that always stands out when you see that, I think. And then that kind of circuitous path, I think that's the right use of that word. I'm going to take 5 points as a Scrabble letter or whatever, but I don't know how Scrabble works either. But yeah, so you kind of took an interesting path to working with some different supplement companies as a what would the term, not consultant, but
I'm a contracted formulator.
okay.
And
I
so
knew there was a very specific name.
yeah, and so what people would do is if they have specific needs for a supplement that they wanted to put together, they would contact me, and you know, we would set up a thing to be able to do whatever the product is that they wanted to do. And I've been doing that for 15 years at this point, a little bit over, and that kind of got my foot in the door in fitness. And you know, I was practicing seeing patients full time. And I turned to my wife at one point and I was like, you know, we're always in the fitness space, you know, breaking down the research, doing all that kind of stuff, helping our friends. Why don't we set this up as a side business where we can monetize this a little bit, you know, for the time that we would be putting in anyways. And like we were talking about beforehand, one of the big selfish things for me was I wanted to be able to write off my own apparel. So it gave me the chance to make an LLC where I could design you know, gym clothes and stuff like that, and then get into that space. But it was a good move for me because, oh shit, for the first 3, maybe 4 years, I was continuing to practice as my main job and just doing this on the side. And then the company took off well enough to where it was a self-sustaining thing. And, you know, being able to own your own business that you can do from pretty much anywhere with a computer is always a great thing, particularly when you live in Hawaii and you can do that job from the beach. So
yeah,
there were some certain quality of life pluses there.
Yeah, that's definitely the dream, is building that online empire that you can have passive income and or check in with folks and just be wherever you want to be and travel the world or be in an amazing location like Maui. That's awesome. I'd love to geek out on a bunch of the supplement stuff. I've had a few. I think this is episode 108 or 109. I'm not even sure anymore. But I've had Rowan Blonix. I don't know if you know Rowan Minion of Blonix. They do some HMB and creatine stuff. I know that's one of the things you guys push, is the HMB creatine.
I don't push HMB. I push creatine.
Right.
HMB unfortunately doesn't look like it has any great data in humans.
Okay. Yeah, that's always and that's where, again, I'd love to have those conversations. I'll just leave that one up in the air. And then but they're big on that stuff. And then Mike Castelli of Nova 3 Labs, again, another supplement company. You're a little more familiar with him or the company. And so he's two of the guests I've had previously, just thinking. And as well, I'm having Rob Wolf on September 1st for LMNT. So I'm not sure how you feel about the electrolyte piece of it.
So electrolytes can serve a real purpose. Now, do we need to have them in a general gym session? Probably not. I mean, are we really sweating or using up electrolytes as much as we think? No. But if you're doing things like CrossFit, yes, it can be very beneficial. If you're doing things like endurance training, yes, it can be very, very beneficial. So, I mean, there are certain supplements that are marketed towards the bodybuilding space that probably don't have a whole lot of carryover to bodybuilding, but you can either feel them with things like beta alanine, or people just think
everyone likes that tingle, pre-workout tingle.
I mean, anything that can make people feel like what they took is working can be at least a placebo effect. And I don't love using placebo, but I get why companies put that in because even if you put in like half a dose of beta alanine, I'm not advocating this, but even if you put in half a dose of beta alanine, people will feel that. And then that can sometimes give you the ability to put in a whole lot of other stuff that really works, because people need that initial buy-in sometimes. And if you don't do it, I mean, I've made some of the best supplements that I have ever formulated, and I think are the greatest things ever. And they'll go off the market. And they'll go off the market because you are putting things in that have distinct effects, but maybe they take some time to kick in.
Right.
And people want to feel that immediately. So that's why a lot of times people will put in things like beta alanine, GABA, anything that can make you feel an effect, glycerol, all those types of things.
And like something like melatonin that often gets so overused.
Overhyped,
not just overhyped, but the over-the-counter dose or the recommended dose is like 3 grams. And you talk to, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on this. I've heard a lot of sleep scientists talk about the concept of like, you probably need, if you're taking 500 milligrams, that's more than enough. And it should, but that's the thing, is it's going to knock you out at 3 grams and you feel like you got more sleep.
So what you're on about is 100% right. Now, if we look at the research for, we're kind of veering off track here, but this is a cool topic. So I like talking.
I apologize, but you'll bear with us.
But this is a cool topic. If you look at actual research for long-term usage, now you're talking about milligrams. So 3 milligrams is what you're equating to 3 grams.
Oh, sorry.
That's just a flub so people can understand. Please don't take 3 grams.
Yeah.
You're going to be unconscious. There's a difference with how you would take it if, say, you were getting back from a tour of duty overseas and you're trying to adjust to a time frame for like 3 days versus if you're taking it every night. So what you're talking about is 100% right. And what we have found in the research is anywhere from like 0.3 to maybe 0.8 micrograms is probably what people should be taking nightly. Now, maybe for someone of my body weight and size, I mean, I'm 230. Maybe I should take a milligram, maybe a little bit more, but it's funny because, to your point, they start those things out at 3 or 5 milligrams a lot of the time. It's difficult to find 1 milligram, and good luck finding any micrograms.
And no one's going to like take a bite of a third of it.
No, you're not going to do that. And
I looked it up just because, yes, I need to remember that it is milligrams, not grams. But yeah, they even have 10 milligrams.
Yeah.
Which seems a little insane.
It's huge. And so the problem that we see with melatonin is that taking those higher dosages long term tends to kind of have an opposite effect on people. It tends to negatively affect sleep cycles. And it's really difficult to tell a person that because, like I said, you can use those higher dosages short term to adjust things like flight lag or some issues that you're having. And so when people are virgin to taking it and then they take 3 or 5 milligrams and it like knocks them out, they're like, okay, this is what I need to take.
Right.
And then they don't realize that long term, they're probably doing themselves a disservice.
Right. And that's where I challenge folks to get a Biotracker and track your sleep. And I have my Whoop code somewhere. I'll put it wherever you're watching this or whatever if you want to try it out. But yeah, and again, another interesting topic. I don't know if I dare open that up to get your opinion on Biotrackers and.
So Biotrackers, if you really want to get it, this is an in the weeds conversation. And I've got the research on this because this is one of the things that I get asked a lot from clients. Biotrackers are great for telling heart rate and for telling certain zones of sleep. The problem is you can't use them extremely well to tell quality of sleep because particularly REM sleep, it doesn't really recognize it because what you have to realize is that this isn't like an electrode that's placed on your brain to be able to actually tell. And that's how they do it in sleep studies. They'll actually place electrodes on your head and get a viable first reading from your brain. With things like these wrist mounted trackers, they are taking a guess. And they're actually taking a guess of a guess because they're using your heart rate variability to be able to put into an equation that's a guess. Yeah. And so it seems to work okay for 1 or 2 stages of sleep and seems to be completely off for another stage of sleep. And so what I would ask people is this benefiting you or is it becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy where you may be having problems? Because I think that a lot of people can look at their sleep and, if you wake up the next day, do you feel recovered or not? And I don't think that we always need a watch to be able to tell that. And so one of my concerns is if it is not accurately telling one of the sleep stages and it's telling you that you are under recovered, are you now believing that you're under recovered because you actually feel under recovered, or is it because your watch told you that? And if we're using a guesstimate of a guesstimate, if it tells you that you're feeling great, that can be a really beneficial thing, but we can never predict whether it's going to say that or not.
Yeah.
So if you're using these things to tell heart rate, particularly when you're doing like cardio and all those kind of things, if you can look at this thing as kind of like a catchy gadget to make you get to bed earlier and focus on quality of sleep, yes, 100%, please do it. Be skeptical about some of the results that those kick out, because I would hate for it to give you a nocebo effect. If you understand what I'm saying there.
Yep.
And so as long as we understand what this can bring to the table, and as long as we understand some of the drawbacks here, we can use these to our benefit, or we can make the decision, okay, well, maybe I'll save my money on that, and maybe I'll invest in something else that can help me.
Yeah, no, I definitely acknowledge that there's a lot of shortcomings of these devices. And again, when we talk in Biotrackers in general, I do throw out that caveat when I speak with clients about the fact that, again, I think the Whoop is the gold standard in my research of the space, which is why I like it. I really follow how they use the algorithms, and again, it's far from perfect, but I do think they're kind of leading the way, along with maybe Aura Ring is a close second.
Is that the ring?
A ring, yeah.
The actual ring, yeah.
Yeah, I think I just personally would never want to wear. I don't even wear my wedding ring. Sorry, honey.
Well, I get worried about that in the gym.
Yeah.
Scuffing that thing up,
Yeah. So I think they have it somewhat figured out that you can manipulate it, or it shouldn't affect your working out. But yeah, I have the silicone $20 ring that I will wear from time to time. But even that I don't like to wear. I think it affects my feel of whether it's the barbell or the gymnastics rings or whatever. So, but yes, to the Whoop, again, I do think it's a tool at the end of the day, and it's just how you use that tool, and having the knowledge of, again, if it tells me, hey, like, you're not doing so good today, and you're like, but I feel great. That can be a problem.
Go with that I feel great feeling, and ignore the other feeling. And then say, okay, well, so if this causes you to critically look at your sleep, yes, you can use this to a really big advantage. So if it says that you're not recovered, but you feel okay, that's great.
Yeah.
But take a second to look back. Okay, what did I do last night? Did I actually lose sleep, or is this like one of those errors that popped up? And if you did lose sleep, is there anything that you can do to correct this? And if you are using it in a conscious manner, in that way, I believe that it can offer you some very distinct advantages.
Yeah. And I'll say again about the Whoop, it's pretty fascinating because my wife's in the 3rd trimester of pregnancy right now. So she's been really closely monitoring it and using it, again, as that tool. We work with a functional medicine practitioner because she also had a diagnosis of an autoimmune condition that has allowed us to kind of, again, day to day with intention of how to use it. And again, as a tool of saying, hey, I'm going to do 10 minutes of cardio in the morning and some breath work, and, just resetting the cortisol concept, because we can't measure cortisol rhythms every single morning. So it is giving us a little bit of sense of that. You could obviously use it you can do all that without the tracker, but it gives us a little bit extra data. And she's had some really interesting data. And within the pregnancy piece, it's going into the group and seeing how certain people, and again, even to the sleep point, how it's interesting, again, and it's not a true scientific study, but she can compare and contrast, even with our OB that we're using. His wife, he was able to look at her Whoop data. So it was really interesting to have that kind of further conversation with our OB of, hey, you're going to have less deep sleep in your 3rd trimester. And in the 1st trimester, it's going to affect you this way. And so it's been really interesting of what to expect, how she's feeling, how she's using that information to a lot of the points you're saying. So there's a lot of really cool stuff there. I know the last thing I'll say about this topic, because I know we got some really fun other topics to get to, is I don't know if you're familiar, they have published some interesting studies that the Whoop specifically was able to diagnose unofficially and detect, that's the word I'm looking for, detect COVID before the PCR would even be positive, based on respiratory rates that it's tracking. So again, they actually published that in, I believe, New England Journal of Medicine. And basically, I know when I got, and again, another thing that goes around like the communities and the folks that do have Whoops is when you're positive for COVID and you get a real good dose of it, especially I don't even remember the names of all the original waves, Omega or Delta or whatever. But
Mm-hmm.
but those first few, when you check your recovery, you're at 1% recovery, which is like, if something's
You're like,
going on
uh-oh.
here, yeah.
Well, I mean, there are. I haven't seen that study specifically, so I can't talk to that the exact nature of that study. But theoretically, if we're monitoring heart rate and COVID has
Well, the thing that they were,
distinct,
I want to jump in because the thing that they're actually tracking, which is again to me mind-boggling, is respiratory rate. And again, to think, and it's like, I don't know how I'll be honest, I don't know how they're tracking respiratory rate on my wrist. I don't know what the algorithm is. I don't know what they're doing. But basically, the theory there is that it's you shouldn't be moving more than 1 point. So my respiratory rate on average is 16.0. If one morning I wake up and it's 18.0, they're like, something's going on. They're going to put in all the other data points of skin temperature, heart rate, all these other things that they're tracking. Again, they're doing some pretty interesting stuff, to say the least. But yeah, that's the thing that the study specifically spoke to, is the respiratory rate.
well, if you can accurately track respiratory rate, so this gets most of the information that Whoops and those things get are from a heart rate variability and a temperature standpoint, and pulse and stuff like that, because that's what it can easily monitor there. It would make sense. It would make a logical thought process to say, okay, well, can we see if this affects COVID? Because COVID certainly has in many people a distinct cardiovascular component to it and pulmonary component to it.
Right.
And if you can monitor heart rate variability and then make a predictive equation that is reasonable, you could see effects like that. Like I said, I can't speak to this exact study, but the grounding for it is solid enough to say, okay, let's check this and see if this works. Because I do think that there's some information there. Now, this is another thing that's kind of an adjunct to what you're talking about, but I think it's really important to bring up, because when you asked about the validity for sleep and recovery, one of the big things that I see people, and I don't know if Whoop does this, so this isn't Whoop specific, but I see a lot of people use these Wristborne trackers to monitor calorie burn.
Oh yeah, no.
They cannot do that.
No, let's.
And again, I want to bring this up because this is a cool topic, and we're kind of in this. They use heart rate variability to tell calorie burn. Right. Guess what doesn't tell calorie burn? Heart rate variability.
Yeah, for
does
sure.
not tell calorie burn.
For sure. I think they're also doing it based off of they're doing a basic BMR calculation for anyone listening, basal metabolic rate, and they're saying, hey, you're 5'8", you weigh 185 pounds.
It tries to.
Right. I think that's what they're the ones that do. And again, I don't look at that's one data point that I am like, that's completely useless to me. If I'm tracking my workout and it tells me I burned 600 calories, I'm certainly not of the mindset, and I'll warn anyone out there, that doesn't mean you can now go have that Big Mac or whatever that's 600 calories.
No.
It doesn't quite work like that.
There's not a coach in the world. It's funny because everyone wants to use this information, but there's not a coach in the world that monitors their calorie output.
Right.
And
I think I heard you talking on Jason Leonard's podcast about this concept exactly. So and shout out to Jason as well.
Yeah, he's a great guy.
Had him on here. I know you were on his, and your wife was also on his podcast. I got to go and listen to that episode. Correct?
I've done podcasts with him about half a dozen times now. Actually, I'm a repeat offender.
Well, he does this 4-part series, which is the first time he told me that, I thought we would record like 2 hours and he would chop it into 30-minute segments. But no, he did literally 4 separate hour recordings. Like I now have a date every Tuesday morning at 8 a.m. with Jason Leonard. So, but he's an awesome dude. But I think I did hear you talking about that fact of like, again, the calorie piece is definitely one to throw out the window. And for many reasons. And I'll try to link somewhere down below for folks who want to go check that out. Because again, like you guys talked about it, there was a lot of dense information in there, and I mean that in the most positive way, in that it's a lot to unpack, and we're kind of diving into these really cool topics that we didn't even want to go here. So
I mean, but they're good topics to talk about. I mean, hopefully it doesn't throw people off too much, but these are questions that a lot of people have in fitness. And getting some minds together to discuss it can always give a little bit more clarity to the subject.
100%. Yeah. So thank everyone for bearing with us on this, but, and yes, the real big takeaway there is Biotrackers, their tool. I'll conclude with saying, I have a lot of use out of it. My wife does as well. And I know a lot of people who benefit from using it, but it's also knowing when to not utilize that. Here, well, I gotta go one other place with this, to the kind of central nervous system recovery piece. So again, anyone who's done a really heavy lifting day and then the next day they feel like their whole body's kind of needs that recovery, and then it's a question of, do you push through or not? That is again a place where I would have some semblance of usefulness, but without the tracker, because I don't expect every single client to go out and get a tracker. And again, I don't know how accurate the Apple Watch or the Fitbit are. I don't trust them nearly as much as I trust something like the Whoop. Another real quick anecdote about the Whoop, and I don't mean to make this a Whoop infomercial, but when they came out with their latest design, Amazon, I believe, as a company, was trying to come out with something similar. And they literally, if you take off the thing and put the micro, and you look at the microchip underneath, it literally said, you can't copy us, Amazon. And like, they made it so that they kind of, firewalled it. Yeah. They threw the shade, but yeah. So it was interesting that, and again, I listen to their podcast. I like their CEO, Will Ahmed, and he's a Harvard guy, and I kind of know people who went to school at the same time as him there and things like that. So maybe I'm a little biased in that regard, but that's the last bit I'll say about Whoop, I think. But the place I wanted to go is, without the Biotrackers, if I have a client, and I don't know how you feel about this, but having a data point of something like hand grip, dynamometer, which is $25, one-time cost, and maybe you need batteries for it, but assessing that, and then again, as a way to test your nervous system. Again, I think anyone who's worked out at any point in their life, they go into the gym and they're like, ooh, like doing a pull-up feels weird today, like whatever. You feel that within your body. There's that intuitiveness to it, having those deeper conversations. But something like a toe touch. So if I just drop down and I like normally can get to my, touching my fingertips to my toe. And today, for whatever reason, after a heavy deadlift day yesterday, I can only touch to my ankle bone, or the bottom of my shin. Then like that tells me something's off, and either I need to kind of, obviously I can manipulate that pretty quickly, but if I'm genuinely checking in with my nervous system, those are some of the ways that I've been able to over time assess if somebody without the Biotracker is recovered enough, and we might need to change something in their programming without being there one-on-one with them. So I don't know how you feel about those kind of concepts.
I think that's fine. I mean, what I do with my clients is a little bit more, I just go by feel. And so I always have my clients, I express the importance of monitoring, you're keeping a logbook, a distinct logbook of your lifts. And I mean, I don't want a general. I want, what did you lift for set 1, set 2, set 3, set 4? And we do progressive overload over time. So we run the same program depending on what we're doing, because I work with both strength athletes and with physique athletes. And so we'll do different programming depending on what your goal is. But we may run a program from a month to 3 or 4 months. And typically for my physique clients, we'll just run it for 3 months, and then we'll use progressive overload during that period. So they should have, outside of that first week or two, a good basis of where should each lift be, because we progress load. I give set variables for sets and reps typically, and set rest periods, so we have some stability in how we put things together. And so you can often tell how your recovery is doing by what are these numbers doing week to week. If your sleep was shit or your stress was shit the week before, are your lifts significantly down? Well, holy crap, maybe they are. And so we realize that, okay, we'll dial that load back a little bit today, and work with what we can. I mean, it's an all or something, not an all or nothing.
Right.
And so do something that you can do, control what you can't control. And I mean, that's a big message in all of fitness, where it's always control what you can't control. But this is more of an intuitive and subjective experience, for my people. But if you have something that you like to use, like a hand grip test or something like that, you can certainly get similar information, and you may be able to get more distinct information from that, because you have an objective number there. And so I've got no problem with you doing that. I mean, I think that's, not that you need my permission, but what I'm saying is I actually think that that's a very viable idea.
Yeah. Another one of those was for the functional fitness athlete who has a concept 2 type rower, whether you call that CrossFit or whatever, is, you should be able to warm up with a 205 on the rower for 3 minutes. And again, if you're
your 500 meter,
something like that. But again, very, very low level as a warm up. But also not, that's the thing. It's getting into the science and the nitty gritty of, if we're at 50% of your max effort, like, is that too light? If you're at 65% and you're struggling at 65%, should we be doing that next lift of trying again, when you're talking into Olympic weightlifting and you're trying to snatch at 90%, you know, that's where you can get into those dangers where, again, if you're doing that under fatigue, which is one of the biggest criticisms of the sport or the concept of CrossFit, where you're doing very highly technical things with some level of danger around it. That's where we get into another whole topic I'm sure you can go off on with all sorts of funness. I can see it. You're the wheels turning in the brain.
I love talking fitness, and I absolutely love it. And so we could go off and talk about anything all day as long as you want. And that's one of the problems with having me as a guest is that like I have opinions.
Yeah, that's the problem, but also the reason we're here, right? So yeah.
So my wife is a competitive or was a competitive CrossFitter. She was a regionals athlete. She for a while held the American record in snatch.
Beth Bacon, right? Beth?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So we went to Worlds. She competed. She got silver in Worlds in her weight class. And so she did really well. So I'm familiar with a lot of, I love CrossFit. I don't do CrossFit myself.
You don't look like you do.
Yeah, but I love CrossFit. And so people will throw a lot of shade at CrossFit, which I feel is undeserved, because if you just looked at the guys in a bodybuilding gym that were doing squats on a Bosu ball, you would be like, bodybuilding's stupid.
Yeah.
And so what you see when people make fun of CrossFit is you see these like videos of the most ridiculous type of programming that CrossFit has, but that's not what CrossFit is.
Right.
You know, those are outliers and they're fun to make fun of because it's just kind of funny to see people do strange things. But the same thing happens with bodybuilding, that happens with strongman. And I think that it's not for me, but the athletes that put themselves into these situations are incredible athletes.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that that this is something that people really need to be conscious about. And to your point of, you know, should you be running up and throwing 90% on your snatch and immediately going if you're not feeling great? No, absolutely not. But I think that that's one of the reasons that you progress up. I mean, you do your warm-up sets and you kind of build up. And if things are feeling off, you say, okay, well, I'm dialing it back, because people always talk about how form is this huge thing that's going to increase injury risk. And they don't realize that form is relatively low down that ladder on what's going to increase injury risk. Training age, sleep, nutrition, mood, you know,
hormones,
all of these things,
all
of these things are more important than form. And I'm not saying that focusing on form is bad, but I'm saying that if you look at the relative hierarchy of what's going to increase injury risk, you being fatigued is much higher up there than you having the absolute perfect form. You can get by with 80-85% form on pretty much every lift and you'll be completely fine. Does that margin of error become smaller with things like snatch and clean and jerk? Absolutely, because they're extremely technical. But for the large majority of lifts, particularly for bodybuilders, you can be sloppy and it's not really an injury risk type of situation. And in a lot of
I would just quickly make the argument that in bodybuilding, the being off on your form and training there makes you more resilient in a lot of ways too, you know, so you can make that argument that strongman type stuff is a nice, sorry, I'm just going off on my thing now, but yeah.
No, it's fine. I think that you mean like putting in some more dynamic movement, a little bit more body
more
English.
dynamic. But again, let's take the deadlift as an example. Again, everyone likes to argue about the rounded back deadlift versus intentionally training the rounded back.
Jefferson curls.
Yeah, well, Jefferson, right? That's a fun one that some people. And again, I literally just had a client who had a pretty significant injury. She's a personal trainer locally here. And I was kind of talking to her and talking through what she's got going on as a physical therapist. She's definitely got some weird symptoms and sciatica and things. And she was loading up her Jefferson curls to like 95 pounds. And I was like, did you progress to that over the course of like 3 years?
And that's the key.
Yeah. And she was like, no. And I give the example that one of the most famous examples of the Jefferson curl, I think, that became is Christopher Summers, a U.S. gym Olympic coach, and he was on Tim Ferriss' podcast. So I think that got probably one of the most famous examples of that I've seen in terms of general population in that regard. But he talks about the U.S. Olympic gymnastics team, the men's team specifically that he worked with. They will build up over the course of a year to get to. They start at like 5 pounds, and over the course of a year, full 12 months, they'll build to half of their body weight. And even that's still being very cautious, things like that. I think this particular personal trainer that I'm talking about was doing it for reps. She was training it, thinking, again, it's some kind of great magical healing tool. And I think it was one of the main contributors to what she has going on now.
I think it is a great magical and healing tool. I love Jefferson curls,
I love it as well.
But you have to progress it. And a problem with Jefferson curls is people start to treat it like their conventional deadlift, and you cannot do that out of the gate. You are nowhere near as strong. You know, if you have not been doing Jefferson curls, you are nowhere near as strong as you will be on a regular deadlift. And I think that this might be up your alley. Do you remember Anna Tunicliffe?
Yes. She was a lanky.
Yeah. Do you remember how she deadlifted? Do you remember?
Oh, yeah.
It was complete stoop
deadlift.
Yeah.
Like I don't know if I can do it justice with the...
Yes, it's very, very rounded. And and I remember watching her and people losing their minds over it, and me being like, this is how she's trained for years. Like, she's not in any increase in
I think she was a rower. Was that one of her backgrounds?
I don't know if that was her background or not. I just remember how distinct that deadlift was. And there was a study called Dry Sharf 2016. And they did I can bring out other studies if you want, but that's the one that I remember off the top of my head. They did a look at stoop deadlift versus the squat type deadlift, which is your typical conventional type deadlift. Even though it's not a squat, that's what they just termed it. It's that hinge deadlift. And they found that loading was only 4% different on the spine. Compressive loading was only 4% different on the spine with the stoop position. Now, there was a little bit more axial loading in the upper lumbar, but in the lower lumbar and in the upper sacral, there was less shearing force than the upper lumbar, or there was less shearing force than the squat type deadlift. And that upper sacral, lower lumbar is the most affected places for injury in these types of lifts. So it's funny because we look at this and we say, you know, people will look at people with rounded backs and they'll say, okay, you're at an extreme injury risk because you're doing it this way. But technically, they might even be protecting that part of the back that has the most injury risk. Now, I'm not advocating doing stoop deadlifting as like your major form of deadlifting. I'm just saying that maybe the way that we look at these things is influenced by the fact that we typically learn to conventional or sumo deadlift, and then all of a sudden, when we try these stoop type of deadlifts, we're stupid and we put on too much weight. Yeah. Instead of letting our body adapt up, and it's amazing what your body can adapt to.
Yeah.
So we're covering the gamut.
We're going also. The last thing I want to say about that, because is one thing I'm very passionate about, and I can open up another huge can of worms, is the nuance piece. There's for novice athletes, especially when I'm working with folks, and again in the rehab space, if someone's coming to me for back pain, I'm confident I can get, you know, your grandmother and or whoever, 80-year-old woman coming in with back pain. I'm confident I can get her at least deadlifting, let's say the 35-pound kettlebell sitting on my floor right there. If not even the 53, if not even the 70-pound, just because, you know, if she's able to get up and down off a toilet or walk up and down stairs, she probably can, and just needs that technique and confidence and, you know, almost positive mindset, empowerment, whatever we want to talk about, which we're going to go into in a second, which we've been meaning to. But my last point on that is I see folks there. And then when I do work with them, and I know this is another fun piece in the fitness space of, should you feel things like that in your back? So for me, from a rehab perspective, working with novice, especially athletes, if we're talking about more experienced lifters, we can argue of maybe you should feel a little bit in the low back specifically. But I very much, as soon as someone tells me I'm feeling it in my low back, I say, time out, let's lower the weight, let's fix the technique, let's do that, whether I'm working with them virtually or in person. So that for me is one of the biggest things. I don't want anyone to feel anything in their low back. The argument is we should be strengthening the low back muscles, the erectors, all the fun stuff there. But I think there's a lot of nuance there, and I'm sure you have some fun opinions to share. But and then after this, we're going to go to the main topic we were meant to.
So I can't disagree with that. I think that this is going to be one of those things that you're going to have to evaluate every patient on a patient by patient basis. You know, does this person have osteoporosis? Is this person completely detrained? Have they never trained in their life? You'll certainly get a lot of older people that have never trained in their life. And I think that promoting a natural spinal orientation is probably the right way to start. Maybe in combination with stoop if you deem it possible. But I don't think that you're on a wrong track by saying, okay, well, if we're going to focus on something and we want to work on a hinge type movement, I'm not going to start people off on a stoop,
right,
to begin with.
Right.
Now, is this a good thing that could be used to strengthen the lower back, to be used in a rehab situation? Yeah, I love Jefferson curls, but I'm probably not going to be starting anyone out in their fitness journey on Jefferson curls. I probably won't. I don't think I've never done that. I've never thought about doing that. It's just one of those things where it's like, okay, are you experiencing this back pain? Should we put this in as an accessory movement later when you're a more intermediate or advanced lifter? Yeah. Then start to put that in and really stress that, okay, this person now has some body awareness, which is, I think, more critical for a Jefferson curl than it is for a standard conventional deadlift. And now they're a little bit more adapted. So even if they get, a little bit out of track in their movement in a stoop, which I think is more possible in a stoop than it is. And this is just anecdotal. This is just my opinion. I think that you might
that's
be
what
able
we're
to
here for. That's what
go
we're
out
paying
of
them.
track a little bit more there. I think that having that conventional deadlift experience is going to have those adaptations in your soft tissue, which we look for to help reduce injury risk. So I think that you're on the right track there by probably not throwing someone into a stoop unless there is a distinct rehab reason to do it.
Well, and just to add a little clarity to that, it's not necessarily throwing them into a stoop. It's even just trying to teach them the deadlift as soon as they or pick something, again, a kettlebell up off the ground. If they are able to have that body awareness of, it's like I'm in a leg press machine and I'm just trying to drive through my legs, and that's what should be. And it is that bracing and body awareness. Those are really the things we're teaching. And again, the way I structure a lot of these concepts, and I'm continuing to build that, and I love chatting with folks about the bigger concepts, and can we find like a unified, eventually that's my grand vision, just as important as peace on earth and no human going hungry. I think that if we can get all the fitness people to agree on one thing, it's can we have higher quality? Yeah. But it's a mission worth fighting.
It's a very noble goal, and I applaud you for trying this.
But that's the thing is I think if at least I can get most of my guests to kind of be on the same page of, or at least I'll share that vision, and you can push back wherever it's worth pushing back, is again, how well do you hinge? And if you and I look at an athlete and we see like, hey, I'm giving them a C- on their hinge, and you're like, I think it's an A, or like that's acceptable to me. That's totally where I think, again, a lot of these conversations can be really fun. But at the end of the day, to me, they're doing their best to hinge or lift something up off the ground with a hinge pattern. And if they feel it, that's the other part of it, is can we get to a place where saying, hey, I feel this in my posterior chain, I feel it in my glutes, I'm sore the next day in my hamstrings and my glutes, versus I'm really sore in my low back and my erectors. And for most people who are not very experienced, that's the red flag for me of like, we did something wrong and we got to address it. Another one there that I see a lot in a lot of CrossFit gyms is a good morning. I would say, I would say 90%, because it should be a pure hinge pattern. It should be the same as an RDL, these kind of things. To me, it's the same exact thing, just where the weight is on the back rack versus down on our thighs or shins. And that's another one that just gets done so poorly. It's kind of amazing to me. But yes, we went off on many tangents. We're going to come back to, unless you have and I'm sure you have closing thoughts on that part of it, but I'm gonna cut you off as the host here. Take the
I only have one quick thought.
All right.
When you do good mornings, if you have issues with form with that, consider using a safety squat bar. It's much more comfortable if you have it available.
I did see a really cool cue. I haven't tried it yet, and I haven't actually done this. Is putting your hands up on something. I'm kind of on the window here, so I'm not going to push too hard, but using that as kind of a closed chain loop to then give you better concept of the hinge. So if you have that kind of, it's an interesting one. I haven't played with it yet.
If I was gonna try to get somebody to learn the hinge a little bit better, I might have them sit down. Have you ever seen seated good mornings?
Yes. I
might have them sit down and do some seated with just the bar at first, because that will teach you to actually hinge instead of trying to squat that up, because you can't squat it up when you're seated.
Right.
And so that might be a better way to get a person as a heuristic.
It takes away at least 1 degree of freedom, if you want to call it that, for sure.
Right.
Funny thing on that, I had one of my clients doing that, who's I'm trying to work with him to learn these things. And at home, he didn't have any weight, so he used a watermelon that was probably a good 10 pounds in a kind of goblet hold, and that watermelon. So his wife sent me the video of him doing a watermelon goblet.
He can use his wife.
Yeah.
Put her on his back.
There you go. Yes. So are we done with that one? We're going to move into your...
Let's do it.
So all the way back to Inland Empire Fitness Conference, where you spoke about this whole big concept of self-determination theory, where we're going to start at motivation and just the concept of motivation. So we talked about a lot of the nitty gritty, where we can geek out on the academics of it. But when we get to the client facing piece, and for anyone out there who's a client, and one other last thing I do want to connect these dots is we're talking about wearables and all this stuff. I think the big takeaway for me to give folks is hire a coach one way or another. And it might be expensive. And even if you do that, obviously go with whatever you can afford. But I think that's a big thing where, again, if you work, and a lot of the learnings I've had, even as a practitioner, even having a doctorate in physical therapy, I've spent $500,000 in education on the body. It's kind of crazy when you do the math. But what I would say is having a coach, and I've had multiple coaches, whether it was through CrossFit, Olympic weightlifting, gymnastics, whatever those modalities are, having a coach, I've learned just as much, if not more, by going through that experience and having that conversation and that feedback back and forth. So a coach like Dr. Allan Bacon of Maui Athletics. So I don't know. I wanted to put that in to connect these dots, because motivation is going to come and go, but also it's sustainable. It's, I think, what we're going to get into of how do we help folks? How do we help clients on that path? So does that kind of connect to what you want to talk about here?
Yeah, just to give a quick outline of what I want to cover here is I want to first talk about general motivation and some of the semantics that I use to kind of help conceptualize this. And I think that when people talk about motivation, it's always this nebulous sort of thing. Like, people want to have motivation, they don't know how to define it, they don't know how to find it. They kind of just stumble into it sometimes, and then they lose it and they don't know what to do. So what I like to do is I like to explain to my clients, and this can be something that coaches can use too. And I specifically talk about this to coaches because I think that we have a lot of information about movement patterns, programming, nutrition. And as you saw with us just rambling on about this stuff for 45 minutes in a great conversation about all these things, like we have all this background information on a lot of different things. But I feel like formal training really underprepares coaches for motivation. And it's one of the most important things that our clients can have. And I think what can help is to look at things in a certain way. And what I like to do is I like to explain to my clients that there's a difference between your true why, or your commitment, and your motivations. Now, again, this is semantical, so someone else can have a different definition of this, but I think that this is a way to put it into perspective that you can use it to your best advantage. So your true why defines why you are committed, even when your motivation is zero. It's your core reason for action. Now, the great thing about your commitment or your true why is that it stays constant for longer stretches of time. Your motivations, on the other hand, are a bit more fluid. The intensity of motivations ebbs and flows, and they evolve readily as your clients' experiences, or as your experiences, shape how you view yourself. And so I think that it's good to define these two things, because I think that a lot of people feel like motivation, they have to have motivation to be successful, but you don't need motivation to be successful. You need a commitment to why you're doing it. And I like to explain to people that it's similar to brushing your teeth. Are you motivated to brush your teeth? I would argue no. Most people aren't motivated like, yeah, I really want to go brush my teeth. It's something that you do because you are committed to a healthy lifestyle in some manner, and the barrier to entry for the habit was low, so it wasn't one that was difficult to foster. Now, motivations can be used as boosts that can help you achieve your commitment or your true why, but they're not required to be successful. So getting that out of the way can give some people clarity on what can keep them going through times when that motivation is low. Now, what's interesting about about commitment trumping motivation is that a lot of people think that an intense feeling of motivation is required for them not only to be successful, but they feel like if they don't have that, then they're doing something wrong. But if it's not necessary to be successful, that's when you can look at this as, okay, well, it's time for me to fall back on the habits and routines that I or my coach has in place, as well as why you are committed to keep you going. And when you use that, that is your base. That's your grounding force throughout your entire journey. Now, whenever you have motivation, that's a bonus. That's your boost. And not only can that boost get you, get you progressing even faster than when you're just at your baseline, but it can be used to reinforce those habits and routines that you're putting into place that will keep you going long after you've graduated from your coach's coaching. And so I think that putting it in these terms can help us put them in a more usable manner than just trying to think, okay, well, I just need to be motivated so I can get this done. And if I'm going to give you one single most important point from this, is that every choice that we have, that we make, has a price, either our time, emotional energy, or money. When we're motivated, it's easier for us to bear the inconvenience of action rather than the pain of remaining the same. What we essentially do is cross a mental threshold and make things happen. Now, the biggest issue that most people have is they get stuck in a rut waiting for motivation to happen. I mean, how often have you heard from your clients, I'd like to start Monday?
Yep.
Monday's bullshit. This Monday becomes next Monday. Next
Right.
Monday becomes next year.
Right. Or everyone's favorite New Year's resolutions.
Do not wait for that. And the reason that you don't wait for that is because what you're essentially doing is you're waiting for motivation to happen. But that's not how life works. Motivation frequently comes after starting a new behavior, not before. In other words, motivation is the result of action. It's not the cause of it. Getting started, even in small ways, will often give you that motivation that you were waiting for all along. And that's why this is literally the most important thing that we could talk about, because it will stop you from that procrastination stage that a lot of people get into and just saying, okay, I need to take these first steps. Nearly all the friction in a task is in the beginning, and it's easier to continue moving forward once you take those first steps. It's essentially a snowball rolling down a hill of motivation and productivity. So figure out what you want to do and take those steps to get moving, and you'll make it a lot easier on you rather than trying to wait for motivation.
Yeah. And I was just going to add in that most people know what the right things are to some extent. We can certainly, again, go back to our 45-minute argument over what's the right supplement, what's the right dosage, what's the right XYZ. But people know they need to eat more fruits and vegetables.
Mm-hmm.
They know they need to eat less crap. They know they need to get into a gym one way or another and get some kind of movement going. So those three things, like at the end of the day, 99% of workouts and coaches are going to give you the same variation on all those things. But yeah, it's interesting that it's just how do you connect to that? And that's where I think the majority of most successful, even social media influencers, the fitfluencers and things like that, they kind of can tap into that, and they manipulate it a lot of times. And they're showing the sexy bodies and the guy without a shirt on dunking a basketball. And I'm not picking on any one particular account that you might be aware of as I'm saying it, but but at the same time, the other part that I wanted to add to your excellent. I want to like take that and bottle it and put it in a pill form or something. But is the 5 whys? You might have heard some variation on this. Is you want to lose 20 pounds. Again, most people can connect to that really easily. And again, it's like what I've literally had people ask me, what's the fastest way to lose 20 pounds? Like we can cut off your arm, like wherever the 20-pound mark is. But all jokes aside on that is, okay, why do you want to lose 20? Why not 19? Why not 21? And then
what's magical about this number?
Right. And then you go further down the path of like, well, why, again, do you want to feel better? Do you think that's really going to help? Because again, like brushing your teeth, we can connect the fact that you brush your teeth every morning and hopefully every night as well, whatever the recommended dosages are. But it's because you don't want to have tooth decay. You don't want to have like, yellow, unattractive teeth. We highly value looking good and things like that. And there are ways you can get teeth whitening and all that stuff. But the whole concept of losing 20 pounds again is like, well, do you want to look good naked? Do you want to attract a partner? There's the joke that once you're married and you're in a happy relationship, you get the dad bod and things like that. And you just let that go because you're not trying to attract a mate. And it doesn't matter to you to look good, but it is that connection. And for some people, it's like, hey, you have a kid. Do you want to be able to walk them down the aisle 20 years from now or whatever? If it's your little girl and things like that. So sometimes for folks, it is going down that 5 why questioning. And again, I think the best coaches do that really well.
Yeah. You typically won't get the right answer for the first 2 whys, at least. Why do you want to lose weight? Well, I want to be healthier. Okay. But why? And you keep going to kind of elucidate that, that true commitment. Like, what does it really mean to you? And people get embarrassed to say, I want to look good naked. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
You know, it might not be your entire reason. It can be your entire reason, but it might not be your entire reason. But there's no reason, there's nothing wrong with wanting to look good in a bathing suit. You know, and if that's what you need to get started, there's a difference in what you need to get started and what you need to stay motivated and committed for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And anything that you can grasp on to get started is a good thing, because you can pick up those other things along the way. But you can't make up for lost time. And that's why Monday is bullshit. So figure out what you can do. And it doesn't have to be full commitment today. You don't need to go out and get a coach today. Yeah. But can you start eating a vegetable at a goddamn meal? Because most people won't even eat those daily, let alone, you know, at every meal. So, you know, start asking yourself, okay, well, what's the lowest barrier of entry for me?
Right.
What vegetables do I like? Can I eat them once per day? Start there. That's it. You're not waiting for Monday. You've all of a sudden got started. Go out for a 20-minute walk. You're not waiting for Monday. You're going out for a 20-minute walk this evening. You know, it's figure out what you need to do. If the answer to that is, well, I don't really know what I'm doing, then the answer is get a coach. And it's not a cost, it's an investment. And like you were saying earlier, if there was one thing, and I think that this is one of the reasons that we get into coaching a lot of the times. If there was one thing I could tell my younger self, I started lifting at 17 and I'm 40 now. If there was one thing that I could tell my younger self, it would be to get a coach. Now, there has never been a better time than now to do that, because back then I would be trusting the random guy in small town Western Maryland where I grew up. Whereas now you could literally get any coach online in the world. And I have clients in Australia. I've got clients in New Zealand. I've got clients all over Europe. Literally every continent except Antarctica, I have clients. And so I point that out not as a bragging thing, but to show the availability of coaches. And you can get a coach for like $200 a month, all the way up to like $5,000 a month. But honestly, there's not that big of a difference between them in most cases. Usually you're just paying for a name. So I've had people come up to me and they say, well, I can't afford a coach. And I'm like, well, where'd you look? And they're like, well, I just went to find the people with the largest following on Instagram. I'm like, that's and this is not to say that like a large following on Instagram is like a good or a bad thing. But if you're going to choose somebody like that, you're going to be paying for name, not necessarily qualifications.
Yeah.
And so if that's a barrier for you to get started, start doing some more research on other coaches. There's certainly a lot out there that can help you out, you know, and make those first moves. Like I said, getting started is the most important thing. And then motivation typically follows after. So whatever gets you motivated to start looking into things, grasp a hold of that and get running and figure out what you can do.
Yeah, 100%.
All right. So let's get into talking about some self-determination theory, because I think that this is really important. And it's one thing that I really do want to get into, because I think that this can help people a lot. But before I really get into the weeds of self-determination theory, I want to, it's a psychological theory that explains how we are inspired to action beyond abstract concepts such as willpower, motivation, and personality. One of the things that I like to do when I start talking about this with people is cover a concept to help put things in perspective. For any given behavior, our actions can be placed into one of two general camps, extrinsic or intrinsic. When our motivations are intrinsically motivated, it's a drive inside us. We do something because we enjoy the action, not because we expect a reward from it. When we're extrinsically motivated, we do something purely for the reward. And it's generally something that we don't necessarily love to do. So an example would be, maybe you don't love working out or exercising, but you like having abs or you like feeling strong, so the effort's worth the cost. Now, this distinction is extremely important. And it actually goes back to one of the things that you were saying earlier, and I was grinning when you were saying it. But I think that it's a really good point to bring up. We're extrinsically motivated through things like apps, competitions, specific physique or performance goals with timelines. And this is what you were talking about when you said, okay, I've got a client that says they'll come to you and they'll say, I want to lose 20 pounds in 2 months. Now, this is an extrinsic type of motivation. And the other types of things that you can get from that are constant praise from a coach, which can be problematic. Now, we have to be careful when we use these as our motivations, because extrinsic rewards and extrinsic type of goal setting can undermine the performance and drive that we naturally have. So if you have a client that comes to you and says that they want to lose 20 pounds in 2 months, if you get to that 2-month mark and you have 2 pounds left to go, sure, it can give you the energy that you need to push through, but it's not something that you can control, and it creates a lot of problems. I mean, this creates really problematic scenarios. No matter what the outcome is, it creates a problem. If you do succeed in reaching that goal, then you've lost the thing that gave you a sense of purpose to begin with. Now you have to start all over again at either baseline or no motivation and try to figure out something else that will get you motivated. If you don't reach that goal, which you had no control over to begin with, then you feel like a failure. So when you live your life as a sequence of milestones to be achieved, you live in a state of near continuous failure. And this is really problematic because, like I said, it damages the drive that the intrinsic drive that a person already has. If we are already intrinsically motivated to do something, adding in things like spots on a leaderboard, client spotlights, or prizes as rewards can damage the joy that we get out of the process. And what's even worse about that is it's worse when it's repeated. So typically what we'll see is a person will have an extrinsic type of goal, like losing 20 pounds in 2 months. And they will hit that goal, and it will give them this big boost of motivation. And then they'll say, okay, well, I want to lose 10 more pounds. Because this is an extrinsic type of goal, what ends up happening is it starts to work in the opposite direction, and it pushes you away from the joy that you're getting out of the process. So you initially get a bump from this, but the longer that you use it, the more it kind of saps the joy out of the process. You start doing it because of the obligation of, oh, I've got to lose 10 pounds. And you start missing all of those ancillary benefits that you get from lifting. You start missing the way that it makes you feel. You start missing the fact that you are gaining some lean muscle. So maybe that's adding weight to the scale. You start missing that you're looking better in the mirror. And it really damages the long-term drive that people get out of the process. Now, you have something to say there?
I got a lot of things to say, but it's fine. if you're on a roll, I'll let you roll. I was going to say, this is part of the reason I have my tattoo that I have. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the unilome, but it's basically, it's a Buddhist and a few other religious symbols that normally it's more of a line. This is added. The tattoo artist made it more of a wave thing. So some people think it looks like a question mark, which is a nice double meaning for it. But basically it's the journey of life, and you're on the process. And eventually it's a symbol for the path to enlightenment. Mm-hmm. So you're supposed to get to enlightenment kind of at the end here. But the reason I'm bringing that up, or it's connecting to me of what a lot of the things you're talking about, is it becomes falling in love with the journey. And, all these philosophical concepts, Zen and the art of motorcycle maintenance and things like that, if you will. So it's pretty fun. And again, one thing real quick that again, I'm sure you can go off on as well, is instead of goal setting, which a lot of people talk about, and you can talk about SMART goals and being very precise with your goals and making sure you have some different concepts there. I talk about process setting. So it's not just, I want to lose 20 pounds in 2 months. It's, I want to get to the gym this amount of times and do this kind of thing. Or I have a coach, I'm going to invest this much money. Again, you talk to, you look at Russell Wilson, who just moved here to Denver for the Broncos, football guy, and he spends over $1 million a year on his body. So it's like that commitment, like you're saying, the investment. So it's that mind change, it's the change in language, all these different pieces to understand that it is not just the 20 pounds. And maybe that's the first step, but it's continuing that conversation and allowing that opening, getting the foot in the door to go down this path.
Well, what you're talking about is having people, and this is a whole goal setting thing. And actually, this was part of my presentation, but I kind of cut it because I wanted to get self-determination. What you're talking about is learning and habit-based goals rather than these, distinct physique and performance goals with timelines that you have no control over.
Right.
You have control over learning and habit-based goals. So what you're saying is exactly how people should be setting goals. When you set your goals as learning and habit-based goals, you're focusing on the process rather than the outcome. The outcome you can't control. Now, you can control general trends if you control the process along the way. But if a girl came to me and said, I wanted to get from, 100, this is just a typical thing that I see a lot of times. If a woman came to me and said, I want to go from 155 pounds to 130 pounds, but they've never lifted before. And like we were talking about, all of a sudden you start adding lean muscle mass, but you look better at 138 pounds. Did you fail? If you let people set goals like that, they will think that they failed a lot of the time. Now, if we move away from that, and, coaches need to take scale weight to have the best information that we can to be able to adjust nutrition. That's just the way that it is. We don't have to have the scale weight to adjust nutrition, but it's more precise when we do. And so I would love to be able to do this without asking scale weight. And in certain clients, I actually cut scale weight from our tracking because it's causing more emotional and mental harm than good. But people get married to the scale, and then it becomes a little bit problematic. And like you said, by focusing on learning and habit-based goals, we set our levels of success to something that we are in control over rather than something that feels like it takes over our lives.
Right.
And like I said, if I didn't need this to be the best coach that I could possibly be, I would not use it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's go ahead.
So what I wanted to do was we talked about the fact that there are two different things with extrinsic and intrinsic types of goal setting. Now, when you're intrinsic, you're more internally motivated. And that's not to say that extrinsic goals or extrinsic types of goal setting can't have value, because like we said, it can get you started on a journey, which is great. But it's more important to find productive internalized motives within ourselves. And so this is where self-determination theory comes into play, because it allows us to internalize these motivations into a more productive form. Now, internalization refers to the active attempt to transform one of these extrinsic motives into personally endorsed values and identity. And in self-determination theory, we don't talk about it specifically as extrinsic or intrinsic, but rather on a continuum of self-determination. Where on one end of the spectrum, we have self-determined behaviors that are more intrinsic in nature. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we have non-self-determined behaviors that are more extrinsic in nature. And we're typically motivated by some self-determined choices that have some extrinsic motives on the side. I mean, maybe the real why for a woman wanting to lose weight is because she wants to gain more confidence when she goes to the beach. But receiving praise from others can add in. So that extrinsic motivation from receiving praise from somebody else can certainly work to your advantage, as long as you're not relying on that to keep you going. Now, there are certain assumptions that self-determination theory makes that it's good to understand, because it can help us utilize it to our best advantage. It assumes that people want to be challenged to grow, master those challenges, and integrate their new experiences into their identity. It assumes that the more internalized motivation is, the more effective it will become. And so the extrinsic types of motivation, they can be beneficial, but they typically are beneficial as an adjunct to a more internalized base rather than by themselves. And that optimal development does not happen automatically. So there's three intrinsic needs that we should be fostering in our clients, or in yourself if you're a client and you're taking this journey by yourself. There are three things that you should focus on that can give you the best chance to make the most self-determined choices whenever you are choosing what behaviors you do on a daily basis. And the first one is autonomy. This deals with independence, not isolation. It feels that when you believe that you're in control of a situation, you're more likely to take action. And for the coaches out there, you can motivate your clients in this way by giving them choices, explaining to them why they are the choices, and acknowledging when a client has preferences over certain things. And there's certainly various ways that we can get where we want to go in fitness. So by giving a person choices, you gain a mental and emotional buy-in from them for the process, and it will ultimately help you, because it cuts through some of the decision-making that you have to go through and figuring out what will keep them motivated week to week. The second one is competence. If a person feels like they're able to do something, they're more likely to do it. And the more a person learns and practices, the more skilled they feel and the more likely they believe that they can succeed. Now, I warned you earlier about constant positive feedback as a coach, because that can initially work very well, but then the more you give them feedback, it's almost like it doesn't mean anything anymore. Unexpected positive feedback will increase feelings of competence. Negative feedback has the opposite effect. And that's why the words that we use matter so much. And like we were talking about earlier, the way that we frame things really makes a difference. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that if you frame things in a negative manner, like I can't eat donuts, rather than I choose to eat, eggs and oatmeal.
Right.
There's a difference in both the feeling of autonomy in that situation, because you're choosing to eat the eggs and the oatmeal, but also competence in that you don't feel like you're in control of your own choices, or you're able to manage the situation because you can't stop yourself from eating whatever it is. Now, there's certainly going to be times where we choose to eat the donut, but for the majority of the times, viewing it as taking control of the situation is much more beneficial for our clients, because it promotes that productive behavior that we want. And then the last thing for coaches, and for people that are doing this on their own, relatedness is extremely important. This deals with a sense of belonging. And so it doesn't mean that you can't work out solo, but it suggests that having a support structure in place is extremely important for optimal development of a person. And you can do this through things like a Facebook fitness community, a gym community, and CrossFit is particularly good at this. This is one of the reasons CrossFit is so successful, because they have such a strong fitness community that things like bodybuilding generally doesn't have to that same extent, at least at an individual gym level. Or from somebody like a good coach. And this enhances, this is enhanced when a person feels respected in what they're doing. Now, without these connections, we lack the help and support necessary to optimally develop. So by increasing feelings of relatedness, it helps you or your clients feel not only someone who is in control on how they face their actions, but who's skilled enough to make it happen. This aids us in problem solving. It aids us in emotional support. I mean, if you're starting out on a journey and you have questions, what are you going to do if you're by yourself? And that's not saying that you have to have a coach, but at least joining something like a good fitness community or figuring out the right people to ask questions to on Instagram can all be beneficial. And then you feel less stress over situations. You can make the right decisions for you and generally experience much more success because of it. Now, the really great thing about self-determination theory is that it helps people take responsibility for their behaviors. People take both credit for their actions and responsibility for when they fail, which allows people to learn from their setbacks. So think about a person who has not met their monthly fitness goals. If they're high in self-determination, they'll look back over what they did over the past month, believe that they can make some changes to that, and put those forward in the future. If you're low in self-determination, you may make excuses. You could look for people to blame, make excuses about the situation, or deny that you had any part in the process. But most importantly, you won't look to make any changes to any mistakes that you have made. And working with self-determination and this type of motivation doesn't mean that you won't fail. You're probably going to fail. There's a difference between failing permanently and failing temporarily. And when you have high self-determination, you can look back over those situations and realize that failures simply become temporary learning experiences for you to be able to progress further in the future. So let's get into the continuum itself. This is what you can actually use. If you have a question about this or don't feel like writing it down right now, you can go to mauiathletics.com and type motivation into my blog and scroll down and you'll find the motivation article that has this information for you. So you don't have to rush to write stuff down at this moment. Did you have something to say?
Yeah, I was going to ask actually, and maybe you are getting there, so maybe I could have pulled back there, but is there an operationalized definition and or a validated tool for measuring? Because you were saying if you're, obviously we can speak in the kind of conceptualized self-determination theory. You're saying if you're high in it versus low in it, we certainly can have an understanding of that. But is there an actual way to measure it? Again, in psychology, I'm sure you're familiar, but for the listener, you're measuring love. It's a very ambiguous concept.
Yeah.
So you have a questionnaire to say, you got 26 out of 30 points. So that's where you are on that scale.
So the way that you do measurements of this, it's still of a semi-subjective nature, but you do it through understanding the continuum of internalization. So what self-determination theory does, and more specifically a sub-theory of self-determination called organismic integration theory, it puts motivation into 6 subtypes. And so you can look at how you feel about a situation and how you feel about what motivates your behaviors. And then you can generally find a baseline for where you are on those 6 subtypes. And that can give you some clues into how you can nudge yourself gently down that continuum to a more internalized form. And so obviously, as we talked about, the more internalized, the more productive your actions are when you're taking those actions. So the continuum is amotivation, external, introjected, identified, integrated, and intrinsic. Now, I'm not going to talk about amotivation really today because amotivation is itself a state of apathy. And although being apathetic about a negative action such as smoking can be a good thing, you're not really going to make yourself apathetic about things. And coaches can't help you become apathetic. And so it's something that's not really worth talking about, although we know it's there. So you can identify yourself in that stage if that's where you are. But the other 5 forms can be used to your advantage. And this is where I find this is very beneficial beyond regular talks about motivation, because when you regularly talk about motivation, it's like I said, it's nebulous. You have no way to classify this. You have no way to have clues on how to find your next step down that road to a better understanding of why you want to do something, or what can motivate you to take action. So by having these 5 particular forms that you can look to for some guidance, you can better help your clients and better help yourself. And this can certainly be used in things beyond health and fitness. I mean, this is something that is extremely beneficial for life in general, for business, for literally anything else you want to do. So, like I said before, it's a continuum progressing from the most extrinsic to intrinsic. The first is external. This is the least autonomous. This deals with things that you don't want to do, but you want to receive an external reward from someone else, or avoid a punishment from somebody. Big examples of these would be universal needs such as money, fame, power, all that kind of stuff. This is where things like constant praise from a coach fall into play. When people go for a jog so they can earn a piece of cake, they want to get a reward for doing something that they don't want to do. And these are problematic because, like I said, these damage intrinsic drive and stifle higher complexity productive tasks.
Yeah.
So moving down the continuum, we get to Introjector. This is, again, a very extrinsic type of form, and it deals with a person's ego. This deals with internal rewards and internal punishments. There's still things that we don't want to do, but we do them because maybe doing it will give us a sense of pride, or not doing it will make us experience guilt. We see this in a lot of cases, like with fad diets, and I don't want to downplay any particular diet. If you're a fan of keto, or if you're a fan of carnivore or primal or whatever it is, you can certainly make most diets work if you have enough knowledge of nutrition to cover any of the gaps. I mean, an omnivore diet is certainly the easiest and probably the most straightforward, because a lot of the others have nutritional gaps that you have to account for, either in supplementation or through specific food choices. But we see this type of ego thing a lot with men, and primal as an example. A lot of men will choose to eat primal because it will make them feel like they're a caveman. It'll make them feel alpha, or whatever it is. And my question for those people would be, if this is a way that you don't truly like to eat, is this something that's going to be sustainable long term? Probably not, without a lot of stress along the way.
Mm-hmm.
So then we move down the continuum and we get to identify. This is where things actually start to become very productive. Identify deals with value.
Can I just stop for 1 second?
Sure.
Is this so we had is this that same continuum of autonomy, competence? Did I miss the third one?
It was external, introjected.
That's the third
you're talking about the intrinsic needs.
Well,
autonomy, competence, and relatedness are the 3 intrinsic needs that must be met to be able to improve yourself down this internalization continuum. So those are important in your personal growth. So now
we're on a different path now.
Yeah. So those 3 things are what are needed to be able to progress you down this continuum. You need to feel like you have some choices. You need to feel like you are good enough to handle those choices. And you need to feel like you have the support structure to be able to fully develop. And when you do this, you can make more self-determined choices. Now, the specific motivations that you have will fall into one of these 6 general camps in the continuum of internalization, but you need those 3 intrinsic needs to be met to be able to progress optimally, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. I just want to kind of bring it back.
Clarify that
framework. Yeah.
So we get into identify next, which is the third of the 5 that we're talking about. This deals with personal values and goals, and we might talk about this. And remember when we mentioned that form is important, but it may not be the most important thing in a fitness journey. If you're like 85% good form or 95% good form, if you're 95% good form, unless you're an Olympic athlete that's really trying to progress, maybe you don't spend all of your time on form work. Maybe you actually start to progress progressive overload, that movement.
The basic concept I'll throw in there is minimal effective dose, right? That I think we talked about, or a minimum level of competence in the grand scheme of, if you're
to allow you to get going. Yeah. And then you realize that you can still work on that form, but you don't need to specifically spend 2 hours working on that form. I mean, I'm thinking of a specific guy, but I don't want to throw anybody under the bus. There's a specific guy online that tells people that they cannot squat with a bar until they can do like a complete pistol squat. And I think that's absolute nonsense, because I think that some barbell squatting is certainly easier than a one-leg pistol in a lot of instances for people. So why hamper yourself in this when you're doing something else? So for personal goals and values, the reason that an example of this would be, and the reason we talked about this perfect form ideal, is that say that you have a client or you yourself are able to hit the depth that you want to hit in your squat. You're doing the movement in a way that's fine. You're not in any injury risk really. But for you, it's a personal goal to be able to have textbook perfect form. Does this matter to anybody else? No, nobody else gives a shit. Nobody cares. But for you, this is personally relevant. So because this is personally relevant for you, it's going to greatly increase the chances that you get into the gym and you work on this. And that's great. You can use this to your advantage. So then we move to integrated. This is the last extrinsic type of motivation. It is extremely internalized. So it's a great thing. All these four that we've been talking about are a progression of internalized forms of extrinsic motivation. Integrated deals with a sense of self. It's a core sense of being. Now, this can be good depending on how you, it depends. It deals with how you self-identify. Now, it can be beneficial or problematic depending on how you self-identify. But when you self-identify in a productive manner, it's extremely beneficial. So if a person views themselves as a gym rat, that's going to greatly increase their chances that they get into the gym, whether or not they want to go to the gym that specific day, whether or not they find that enjoyable. Now, this shares a lot of characteristics with intrinsic, but it is not intrinsic overall because you're still not doing things for the pure joy of the situation. You're doing things because you view yourself in a certain way. But it can be used to a great advantage to yourself. And then the last one that we get to on this continuum of internalization is intrinsic. This is where we want to take ourselves or take our clients if we can, even if it isn't always possible. Now, it's not necessary to be successful to get to intrinsic, but it sure makes things a lot easier. When you're intrinsically motivated, this is that internal drive that we were looking for and talking about earlier. This is all the buzzwords. It's joy, like pure commitment to it, self-esteem, all those good things that we're looking for. Now, it's the most productive because you rarely have to motivate yourself to do something that you truly enjoy doing. And so if you love working out, regardless of the benefits that you get to your physique or regardless of the performance benefits that you get, you're going to get in and you're going to work out anyways because you actually enjoy just exercising. And yes, there are people that do that. There are, and a lot of people have a problem wrapping their head around that, but there's a lot of people that like to work out because working out is enjoyable for them. And so this is where we want to take people, even if it isn't always possible. And bringing this all together is important because this can feel like an overwhelming talk in the beginning, particularly when you don't have the visuals that I had available at the conference, which is why I was saying, going to MauiAthletics.com, go to the type in motivation.
I'm actually working as you're speaking to pull this up, but I'm just having a little bit of technical difficulties on my end, but I'm going to pull up the visual in a second for anyone watching.
Okay. Type in motivation and go to, I think it's a few.
I think I have one that you're talking about of the full continuum. And unfortunately I need to figure out how to rotate it 90 degrees right now, but is that one of the ones you're talking about?
Yeah.
Hold on, I don't know how to. For me. Yeah, it's sideways. So I'm gonna remove that for now.
Okay.
I'm working to rotate.
Okay. So bringing this all together is important. Finding your why or your commitment, like we talked about in the beginning, is kind of an irritating thing. I mean, it requires a lot of introspection and it requires some knowledge on the topic. And like you were talking about, I mean, if you have to ask why 5 times, most people won't do that kind of thing because they think that they should know. But you're not going to know until you start to get into this and really start to map this out. And just as an example for me, when I first started lifting, I was 6'1" and 165 pounds. I was a high school athlete and viewed myself as such. So I had a little bit of integrated motivation and then I viewed myself as an athlete. But most of the reason that I started lifting at 17 was ego driven. I mean, I wanted to put on muscle mass because I wanted to have more respect from guys, and I wanted to have a better chance with girls. And there's nothing wrong with that, but that's an extrinsic type of motivation. And at the time, I didn't have the knowledge or the understanding of what commitment was or what a why meant to me. So I was driven by external and introjected types of motivation for many, many years. Now, over time, I started to view myself as a fit person and hobbyist bodybuilder. So integrated was in play. And I really started to enjoy lifting. So I actually got to intrinsic. But like I said before, intrinsic isn't always possible for people, and that's okay. Muhammad Ali had a famous quote where, and you might be familiar with this, where he said that he hated every moment of working out, but he loved winning.
Yeah.
Muhammad Ali never made it to intrinsic. And I want to point that out because I don't want people to feel upset if they just don't love going to the gym or, eating in a certain manner. That's okay. Right. He viewed himself as the best, and he damn well made sure that it was so. So he had integrated motivation that kept him going for an incredible career. So you can motivate yourself into some of these, you can upgrade yourself into some of these higher levels of internalized motivation, like identified, integrated, and intrinsic. And as long as you have one of those as your base, you can do just fine. And just because you don't have that in the beginning, don't get frustrated. Because like I said, most of us don't start out with those in the beginning. Most of us start out with some sort of external motivation. Maybe you want to look good at the beach. That's okay. It's fine. It's getting into taking those first steps. It's the most important thing. And like we talked about earlier, motivation is the result of action. So start yourself down that path. When you're a coach, you can ask your clients open-ended questions. And the way that I do this, and people can do this for themselves, sit down with my clients. I have intake forms and initial interviews. And I ask them why they want to do things. And we go through a similar process to your 5 whys. And asking them their whys will allow you to get an idea of where their motivations lie. You can categorize their motivations and note their baselines. And I have my clients check in every 2 weeks. We do bi-weekly check-ins. And I incorporate some motivation-related questions at their check-ins to monitor how they're doing. And I don't say, I don't show them specifically this continuum. I keep an ear out and I say, okay, well, what successes did you have this period? Where are you noticing benefits? And a lot of times they'll say, you know what, one of the generic ones is I was able to keep up with my kids when I wasn't before. Great. Mm-hmm. Note that down. Bring it up to them. Unexpected compliments go a long way, as does wearing them on progress beyond the scale. And so when you periodically meet back up, and you can do this if you're a person that you're taking this journey by yourself, every 2 or 3 weeks, meet back up and say, okay, well, how do I feel about this fitness journey that I'm on? What benefits am I getting out of this? And that can give you some ideas of what is starting to come into your line of view as things that matter to you. And they're going to change over time. You're not going to immediately start working out and say, man, I really love working out. You're not going to immediately start working out and say, man, I feel so much better when I work out. It doesn't work that way. The first month that you work out, you're going to be sore as shit. And you're going to be like, why did I do this? Push through that. Continue on, and you'll start to see all these benefits that you didn't know were even possible. And so I think that by having these mindfulness exercises, either by having a coach incorporate these into their periodic check-ins, or having a person periodically ask themselves these questions. And if you've got questions on how to set these up, look me up on Instagram, Dr. Allan Bacon, Allan Bacon, and send me a message, and I can help with a back and forth to get you guys going on these things. But come up with a way to monitor these mindfulness exercises, to ask yourself some questions. Okay, what am I really getting out of this? And certainly you're going to have some spots where you're like, I don't really love this, but what do you like out of it? What are you benefiting from? Because if you're not finding any benefit in any of this, is not something that's going to be sustainable anyways. So don't lie to yourself about it, but be honest and say, okay, well, where am I finding benefit? And it doesn't have to be the scale. It can be all these other, less than concrete things that you get benefits out of. Are you getting stronger? Are you feeling more confident in life? Are you feeling happier? Are you sleeping better? There's all these different benefits to exercising and eating healthy that we kind of push under the rug because we just want to see that scale drop.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so as a coach and as a person who's being mindful of this, always think of ways that you can foster this motivation down that continuum of internalization. I mean, at this point, you can look at that at that setup, that continuum, and you can say, okay, well, I think I'm here when I'm starting. You know, what appears in this next stage or two that I could potentially be getting out of this. And when you realize that you are getting something out of it that's in those stages, great. You know, make a note of that, write it down. Ultimately, as a coach, the more internal the motivation, the more productive it is. So if you can nudge a person to identified, integrated, or intrinsic, you're doing a wonderful, wonderful job. And since those are extremely productive forms over time, these are the things that that you'll get the most out of. And not only will you give your clients a longer lasting experience, but it'll be much more enjoyable for them in the process. So the most important things, those intrinsic needs should be focused on, particularly if you're programming for somebody else, or if you're doing it for yourself, think of ways that you can improve that. You know, give your clients choices. If you're doing this yourself, you obviously have choices. But if you're having someone else program for you, ask for some choices, or, you know, be open to giving your clients some choices, because like I said, there's a lot of different ways that you can get where you want to be. Be conscious of your knowledge of a situation. If you need it, reach out to people. And this is where relatedness really comes into play. You can improve relatedness and autonomy, or sorry, you can improve competence and autonomy by increasing your relatedness. Join a CrossFit gym with somebody who knows how to program. You know, join a Facebook fitness community with an admin staff that really knows what they're doing. You know, hire a coach that knows what he or she is doing. If you do this, you're going to set yourself up for the best long-term progress you can possibly have, because you're going to be giving yourself that support structure that you're going to need. And particularly when you're starting out, you're not going to know everything, and that's okay. We don't expect you to. No coach is going to expect you to, but you need that parachute to be able to ask questions. And in the fitness community, I found that there are a lot of people that are very willing to give their time, even for free, to help out a lot of people. Now, that doesn't mean that you can go to a coach and say, hey, make me a program, because you're not going to go to the grocery store and just walk out with food. So you can't ask that of a coach. But I mean, I have a fitness community on Facebook, the Maui Athletics group. And, you know, we answer questions in there every day. There's certainly a lot of related type of groups, and you can get a great start off of that. And then maybe you'll find that coaching is right for you, or maybe you'll meet the people that you'll find that are right for you. Maybe you look up, you know, people like Bo to help you with, you know, what he's really good at, and you find those knowledgeable people. But make sure that you have that support structure in place rather than going in blind. And I know that it can be a daunting task, but like I said, it's never been easier than this. We've got so many options on where to get good information. It just takes some time to search out those means.
Yeah, we're in an age of almost limitless access to information, and like you were talking about, you know, even a decade or two ago, you were at the mercy of whoever was there locally at your YMCA or your Equinox or whatever. But I do have the graphic up here for anyone watching or on YouTube. I do have to go to a lunch date shortly, but I do think it's a great visual representation of everything we've been talking about. I don't know if you want to highlight any way for folks to, if they're watching or they want to click on the YouTube link, to see and read that. And again, maybe a way that they can figure out where they fall on that continuum. And the last thing I'll say before I let you answer that piece is, I definitely know there's a lot of self-determined, self-motivated people who, to your point, don't necessarily know how to utilize those tools. And they're saying like, hey, should I go do a Smolov program? Should I just, you know, what should I train for? And connecting to that. So quite a spectrum and continuum of that as well. But is there a way folks can utilize this visual that we have up on the screen here?
The one on my website is actually broken down a little bit more simply, so it's easier to understand. And I give some examples in each. And I'll
try to link that in the show notes.
I would recommend going there, and I can even send that to you. But I mean, it's kind of a more understandable version of this, broken down a little bit.
Gotcha.
And it also has an article with it that kind of explains some of the things. So I think that would be an easier way to do it.
Yeah, we'll definitely get that linked somewhere.
If you have questions, like I said, go to Dr. Allan Bacon, or at Dr. Allan Bacon on Instagram. Send me a message if you have any questions about this. I don't mind helping out. Understand that I get a lot of messages, so it might take some time to respond, but I will get back to you. You know, because I think that even with this outline, it can be a little bit difficult to understand certain ways to utilize it. And I think that having a little bit of guidance there could be beneficial for a lot of people. So certainly reach out there. Feel free to do that anytime. But there's a lot of resources for self-determination theory online now. It's heavy reading because it is a psychological theory, and so it might just be easier to get to my article and then ask any questions that you might have. And certainly, if you want to go through Bo, I don't want to offer his services, but he can shoot me any questions that he might get, and I'll help stay in touch with him and keep connected.
Yeah, and then one of my other takeaways from, if I can summarize a lot of what you just threw out there at us, is from some of the negatives of it, and again, maybe you can tell me where this fits in the continuum, but understanding that controlling your effort, and as a coach or parent or somebody in that situation, praising the effort, not the success, is something I've definitely heard a lot, and something as an expecting father, I'm trying to make sure I practice even more of, hey, like, I saw you studied really hard for that test, so it's all right that you got a B. Let's see what else we can change in the effort, so you can control what you can. That's always been a big part of my own mindset.
Well, I mean, remember when I said that that self-determination theory is not synonymous with success.
Right.
Self-determined people fail. The important thing here is that you are enacting control over a situation. Remember, we're going back to competence and autonomy. You're enacting control over a situation. It's not over a specific outcome. Now, this is where, when you do that, this is where failures become temporary learning experiences that can be leveraged for future success. So, getting a B is certainly not a failure. So that's probably not, I didn't want to infer that was the case, but you're gonna
I come from an immigrant family, so
I mean, mine was
these were not acceptable.
Yeah. So you're gonna fail.
Yeah.
And I say that with love. You're gonna fail, and that's okay. I mean, Bo and I have failed. Everybody fails. The people that succeed realize that they can do better in most cases. I mean, sometimes you'll look at a thing and you'll be like, there's nothing that I could have done better. Great. Then ignore it. Move on. If there is something that you could have done better, I am a big proponent of writing things down, because I think that if we just think it, we'll lose that within like 24 hours. But if we write it down, we can reference that and say, okay, I was challenged this period. And I find that one of the biggest issues that most people have is they have a tendency when they get challenged to hit the pause button. And you might have seen this with your patients and clients, where they're like, oh, my life's getting difficult for 2 or 3 months. Can I hit the pause button on coaching or whatever it is? That doesn't teach you anything. It teaches you how to quit. It doesn't teach you how to weather through adversity. Right. So rather than looking at it as, oh, things are going to be difficult, I should quit, look at it as, what can I do in this situation? Enact control where you can enact control.
Yep.
Rather than on the specific outcome. So when you were talking, this all kind of ties back in together. This is where the learning and habit-based goals come into play. And this is where you can act in control and have objective measures to see if you are controlling what you can control. People will come to us and they'll say, people have a tendency to sign up for coaches when life is magical. They have nothing to do other than getting into the gym and cooking food. And then all of a sudden life hits and reality steps into play. And maybe we did a programming thing for them where they had 5 days a week of weight training, and now all of a sudden they can do 3. People are really bad, and this is not a client's fault, but people are really bad at telling their coach, I can't do 5 days anymore, because you feel like a failure. But this goes back to that whole not hitting the pause button. The reason that you're on the diet roller coaster every year is because you hit the pause button. So rather than doing that, have an open dialogue with your coach, and your coach should be allowing you, or should be telling you that this is part of the process. But having an open dialogue with your coach where the coach says, okay, I want to know how you're feeling about completing your learning and habit-based goals week to week, and we can adjust accordingly. Because the way that a good coach or a long-term advanced athlete works is they may not be able to get in 5 days a week, even though they've been doing that for 3 years straight. Now, all of a sudden, they can only get in 3. And that's okay, because they're adjusting it so they're doing something rather than nothing. They don't lose the progress that they've made, and they know that they're in a holding pattern, but that's better than losing those habits and routines that you have been building, losing the systems that you have in place. I mean, there are distinct benefits to just continuing going to the gym, even if it's only 20 minutes. It's forming that habit that you continue to do this. This is just part of your daily process. And if you can only get in for 30 minutes, good. That's better than nothing. And more so than the benefits to your health, which you can still see pretty significant benefits at 30 minutes, more so than the benefits to your health, it keeps that pattern going. So you don't have this 2 or 3 month period and then you try to come back and you say, I can't get back into this routine. You don't lose that routine.
Yeah.
So that habit and learning based goal, that those systems that you're reinforcing tend to last much more long term when you view it as, okay, well, what can I do this week?
Mm-hmm.
And having that open conversation with your coach is the way to do that. And so that's correct.
Yeah, and I think we could keep going, and maybe Jason of Revolutionary You has the right idea, breaking this into 4-hour-long episodes. But
maybe I was the problem there. He's like, this guy won't shut up, so I got to do.
No, not at all. No, I'm saying I want to continue, so I'd love to have you on for a part 2. But yes, my wife is texting me like, "Hey, we gotta go. We got a lunch date." Which, yeah. But I would love to stay. But folks know where to find you. Again, Dr. Allan Bacon, Dr. Allan Bacon, similar to my handle here, and on Instagram. And again, folks can reach out to me. They should be able to comment in wherever they're listening or watching to this, and should be plenty of links everywhere to reach out and connect. But anything else you want to leave the folks with under 30 seconds?
No, I think that we've covered enough for today, but it was a great talk, and I want to thank you for having me on.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for your time. I did want to ask the logo, is it the Iron Man play, that because you called it the
no, that was just because of the placement on that one shirt where I had it in the arc reactor. This is just just a stylized wave for Maui Athletics.
Gotcha. I saw the arc reactor thing though. I figured it was an Iron Man reference at least.
Oh, that one was. Yeah. It was definitely. And you know what's really funny is that my apparel, this is not a selling thing, it's just a funny anecdote. My apparel is actually on Amazon Prime.
Nice.
And so I have that thing on my website in the shop, and then it links you to Amazon Prime. But what's really funny is Amazon denied that. They're like, you can't use this word.
Huh.
They're like, Marvel owns that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not surprised. I mean, technically, Bo Jackson owns Bono's stuff. Bo knows. He owns Bo knows. So I had a friend, an attorney, look up that. She said he does technically own the copyright. So until Bo Jackson contacts me directly and tells me to cease and desist, I will keep running with it. But I have the Bo knows with Bo Jackson of Kansas City Royals hat thing. Anyway. But all right, we can keep talking. I appreciate this. I would love to do 17 more parts. Really good stuff. I hope. I don't know if you saw the comment when you were talking at some point. Phil was checking in. He said mahalo to you, and he had to run, but he's going to go back and listen to the replay. So cool. Other than that, I'm not even going to pull up Thunderstruck because we got to run. But again, would love to chat more. If anyone got at least 1% better from this, I can't imagine how you would not if you paid any attention. We covered a lot of stuff, and folks, hopefully go share this with someone you love that you can benefit from, they can benefit from, and till next time, mahalo.